Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So a while back, I watched I think it's like a tutorial on YouTube about how to do pixel art in Procreate. And this was like a while ago and I never really revisited playing around really with pixel art in Procreate. So I thought it'd be a good idea to revisit that today. And initially I started off making this kind of template of a room. I didn't end up getting too far with it, and mostly because I was going to do this all off screen to get some practice, but I think realistically it'd be kind of fun to show you guys how I'm working more or less kind of fresh from using pixel art in Procreate, because one, I'm not very proficient in pixel art, and then two, doing pixel art in Procreate is a little bit different, or at least I find the workflow a little bit different. But I'm not going to be treating this as a tutorial. I'll leave a link in the description with how to make the brush and to set up your canvas and everything for pixel art on Procreate. So I'll make sure to leave that in the description. Please check it out if you're interested, because they do a wonderful job of explaining everything, and their like overall, I guess, like image that they ended up making and stuff, or their illustration is beautiful. So highly recommend you check that out. So for today's little projects, I'm going to start with a 128 pixel by 128 pixel, which is a very tiny square, and we are going to set up my grid by using the drawing guide. And we do have to edit the drawing guide so that these squares are not 4 pixels wide, so that we can make it kind of like fit our actual pixel brush, which has to be 1 pixel wide. So down here you can change the grid size, and you can see that clicking like in between the two boxes create a double square or a rectangle, and then clicking within a box makes individual pixels. So I didn't include this in the video, but if you click on a kind of like the middle of a quadrant of 4, then it will fill in like a little box. So it'll fill in 4 pixels at a time. Now, even though I found it a little bit easier for me to use that to my advantage, like right here as I'm setting up kind of my isometric little room. So I'm doing basically a diagonal line going kind of like both ways at this point, but I'm going to be duplicating it, and you go 2 pixels at a time diagonally to get this kind of isometric little setup for your template. So I am going to be doing a room, and I did do a different pixel video at some point, I think last year, and I did that in Paint Tool SAI, which tends to be my pixel program of choice because it has the binary tool. So I am going to be kind of like making a little room, which I was going to be making it into Masaki's room, but ended up not doing that because my lack of like organization or like designing skill is very lacking. So if I spent more time planning out everything thoroughly, then maybe I could have done it. But at this point, I just really wanted to get started and draw something for the room. So the rest of the video will be in time-lapse mode until we work on the second, third, and fourth drawing, and I'll have some bonus footage at the very end of me working in Paint Tool SAI on some extra little pixel art pieces. So let's move back to talking a little bit about the process about doing pixel art on Procreate alongside with my kind of experience using it. But take everything I say kind of with a grain of salt, just because I am nowhere near proficient using pixel art in general, let alone in Procreate. So I'm just a person who just enjoys it from time to time, and I just kind of dabble here and there whenever I have the interest in doing it. So I think if you already have Procreate and you kind of want to do maybe some sketches or just like ideations of like things you want to do for like pixel art and stuff, this could be a fun way. Now, I believe there are actually some other apps you could probably download to do pixel art a little bit more proficiently, and they're probably meant for pixel art. So maybe in the future I will take a look and see whatever options there are. I know some people have done pixel art also on Ibis Paint, so I'm a little bit curious on whether or not that's a little bit more easier to work with, because the thing I dislike about working with pixel art in Procreate is that even though there is kind of like a workaround to get a brush that does 1 pixel at a time on Procreate, alongside with making sure your grid is able to display what you're kind of looking at, so you're not going in like fully blind. But the thing I found difficult is the fact that this brush has the option to let's say if I click on the middle of a line, it does both pixels at the same time. Or like I said, if you click in the middle of like a quadrant, it kind of fills in the 4 pixels together. And if you're trying to make a straight line, if your hand or whatever movement you're doing is truly not straight, it will do like a double line or like kind of add another set of pixels as the width. So it no longer is 1 pixel width, it becomes like 2, and then it'll go back to 1 instead of having a just single pixel jaggedy line, which is something I'm more used to. So it was a little bit hard when I was trying to, I guess, like work a little bit more quicker. Now, like I said, because I'm not like proficient in pixel art or anything, it might be just me being a little bit nitpicky about the process, but maybe someone who's a little bit more proficient in it maybe doesn't find that that's an issue. It might be also just because of my accuracy when I'm working with the Apple Pencil in Procreate alongside with this brush. Maybe I'm just struggling with it. So, you know, if you really want to try, I highly suggest you give it a go and try it yourself to see if you like it. I do think like this attempt isn't too bad, and I tried my best to actually pick colors that were similar to the ones that I did previously in a different video talking about pixel art. I'll put those on the screen as well, but this one turned out a little bit more, I don't know if it's like higher contrast alongside with the color choices are a little bit more saturated. I was looking at the colors via my phone rather than on my same screen, just because I didn't really want to open another window on my screens to show me my previous pixel attempts. But I think I like this one more than the other session that I'm gonna do in a little bit, just because working with like faces or characters sometimes is very hit or miss for me when I do pixel art, like even on like Clip Studio Paint or Paint Tool SAI or whatever, MS Paint, whichever you want to do your pixel art in. But for some reason, I just had more fun working on this one where I'm just playing around with the shapes. And another thing that I kind of struggle with pixel art in general is the fact that usually less is more. And that goes for like details and for color and like the shape. But for me, at least like when I start working with a lot of pixel art and stuff, I tend to go willy-nilly and I don't have a lot of rhyme or reason. So a lot of things don't read as clearly, or I try to work a lot larger so that I could fit more detail and allow myself to do, I guess, like some things that might not be traditionally used in pixel art technically, because usually, let's say if you look at video games or anything of like that old retro aesthetic, limited color palettes are very well done and also very popular. So I tried my best to keep everything to a minimum in terms of the color palette because I was referencing my old one at the time. But usually when I work with pixel art, I don't give myself like a color limit or anything. I just go willy-nilly. I'll put some examples because I was working on shimijis again, where they're little kind of like desktop pets or like little guys who run across your screen on your computer. So I'll put a few examples on the screen if you're interested, but you can see that I have a problem of not being able to do like pulling back and letting things be a little bit more simple. But we're actually wrapping up with this one. I decided to add a little bit of curtains because I added a curtain rod, but that's basically it for this particular piece. I then brought it into Clip Studio Paint to actually enlarge it at an appropriate size. So basically working at 128 pixels is extremely small. So usually for like displaying or posting anywhere else, it's way too small to work with. So right here in Clip Studio Paint, there's something called Hard Edges Nearest Neighbor. This will ensure that your image will increase in size while keeping the nice crisp quality of pixel art. Otherwise, your edges might look a little bit fuzzy or have a little bit of that anti-aliasing around your image. So basically the pixels increase to a certain size and then the nearest pixels around it will be the same color as everything next to it. As long as you increase by an appropriate size, most likely everything will increase appropriately and will still look like your perfect squares for your pixel art. So moving on to the second session, I wanted to do some kind of like little headshots of some of my OCs. So initially I had a 128 by 128 canvas. I decided to expand it so that I could fit 3 of my OCs. So in order from left to right, I will have Kaisen on the left, we have Sato in the middle, and then on the very right we have my OC Akemi. Now, I am going to preface this session with saying that I had very little patience for some reason when I was recording this session, so I do not really like how these little, I guess like headshot of my OCs look like, so please bear with the footage, and at the very end I will do some redemption versions of them in Paint Tool SAI, just because I truly was not happy what these look like, and this is not like a good representation of what you can do with pixel art in Procreate. This is just clearly user error and just me being a little bit fussy in general with the recording. Also, for some reason the colors look horrendous right now, so he kind of looks very orangey, very yellowy. I don't know if it's my white balancing on my camera, but once I kind of finish up all 3 of the headshots, we can actually just see what they look like at the very end when it's normal colors. So apologies with the weird vibrancy and saturation of the colors currently. But in terms of process, both for the first session and the little free portraits of my OCs, I usually like using a 1 pixel brush, or at least a brush that's set down to basically size like 1, and I will sketch out something to allow me to have some kind of a base, and then I will do the pixel line work, usually of like the face or like the main template or structure first on top of that layer, and then I'll color things one by one. And if you've seen me kind of do my, I think it's like my VTuber models for rigging, I kind of do it in the same kind of way. So I kind of chunk things and fill color as I go one by one, depending on what section I'm working on. So for my OC Kaisen, you would have saw that I did his face first, filled in the skin tone, I did his eyes, and then I filled in the shadows around his eyes. Then I did the hair in kind of more of a silhouette version where I do 1 flat color. After that, I will kind of alpha lock it, because I do try my best to separate the layers separate my sections into different layers so that it makes it a little bit easier for me to stay within the flats when I'm trying to render out the pixel art a little bit. So when I do the hair, I like to either pick the mid-tone color or the darkest color and then work my way to the lights so that it's easier for me to almost like carve out his hair, or like kind of like add light as we go, just because if I'm planning out individual lines, I get very much stuck with adding too much detail that doesn't read very great. And I highly recommend that if you are working in Procreate or Clip Studio Paint, or you'll see later when I'm working in Paint Tool SAI, I love having other windows of my current workspace open alongside the current piece that I'm working on. So in the kind of like upper left-hand corner of my Procreate, you can see I have my reference window open, and I have it directly only on Sato so that I can see what she looks like when she's a little bit smaller versus when I'm working on her zoomed in and trying to fuss with each individual pixel. So as I'm working on each of the 3 of the characters, because I did Kaisen first, to kind of keep them within the similar size range, I am going back to Kaisen, tracing over his face shape and adjusting wherever I need to adjust to make sure that they kind of roughly are around the same size. And I think a part of that made them get derpier and derpier over time. I think I do like Akemi's maybe the most out of the 3, even like the ones that I did in Paint Tool SAI, which we'll see a little bit later. I probably like Akemi's the most, so I don't know. I feel like he just fit a little bit nicely with this more simple style. Every time I drawn him like digital painting in my sketchbook, sketching him with like pen or pencil or anything, he always looks a little bit funny, a little bit dorky and derpy, which I don't mind, but it's not like initially that's how I want him to look. I definitely think he looks a little bit better for some reason in the last pixel version that I do of him. So he looks a little bit cuter in that, at least, which is kind of like the silver lining, because sometimes when I do pixel art, I scrap almost all of it. So yeah, it's still fun to do and it's kind of therapeutic at times. So highly recommend if you haven't tried pixel art to, you know, do a little bit of research, watch some professionals do it and stuff, or people who are way more proficient, and give it a go, because I think it's something that's like very fun, and I feel like anybody could do pixel art because there's so many tools at your disposal in terms of trying it out. Or I remember sometime during the pandemic, I was actually somewhere at somebody's office where I was just messing around on MS Paint and using a mouse to do some pixel art. So you truly can just do it with a mouse and just a computer and just have fun doing it. So yeah, here's the little overview of both of the little drawings today. This waving is not the end. So yeah, here's kind of the small version and the larger version of all three of my OCs right here. But we are doing a little bit of a bonus drawing, just as a little bit of redemption for myself, just because I woke up the next morning and saw the little pixel versions that I did on Procreate, and I really disliked them. So I'm just gonna let myself have full reign and just have fun doing pixel art in Paint Tool SAI. And yeah, I think these ones turned out the way that I would like them to look like. But as I mentioned before, I definitely think for pixel art, if you can, less is definitely more, and it makes things a lot easier for people to read, just because pixel art tends to be on a much smaller scale. But because I'm just playing around with pixel art and just messing around with everything at my disposal, I'm not going to be really caring about making things look super clean. So whoever is out there that's like a pixel pro, please don't come after me. I'm just trying to have fun here. But yeah, I think in the future, probably next week's video actually, I will record some footage and talk a little bit more about making pixel shimijis, which I've done in the past, but I realized I made a promise to you guys like a year ago that I was gonna make a bunch of shimijis based on whoever was the top suggested character, both from Genshin and VTubers. Now the VTuber ones, I did only my Oshis at the time, which I'm going to be taking a break from, but I will be working on Honkai Star Rail, I'll be working on my OCs, and alongside with Genshin characters as usual, and I might make a few other ones, but I feel like those ones are the ones that I'm going to focus on. So please look out for those in the future. I'll definitely make community posts whenever I finish any of the shimijis, but I'll also post them directly on my Twitter. So if you're ever looking for my shimijis or like links to them, they'll be always on my Twitter. So yeah, you can sort by media and hopefully you can find all of them. Eventually, I will probably make like a card or something so that you guys will have an easier access to all of them. But with that being said, shimijis and pixel art in general takes me a long time, so I'm going to work on Xiao first and maybe Nouvelette, just because it's a little bit self-indulgent, but Xiao was the most suggested character for me to make as a shimiji. But since then, I kind of transitioned from making shimijis just by like really tiny little simple chibis and shifted to doing them with pixel art. So I think it'll be fun to show the process once again, but with a much more detailed character, because I think the last time I showed it, I did a fan mascot, so he was like a very small, round, very less detailed little critter. So yeah, I think it'll be fun to do that, and I can show you guys more of the shimiji process probably. But now that I've kind of rambled my way through, we already finished my OC Kaisen, which I actually really liked his version. I'm still going to fuss around with his colors once I eventually get to do either drawing reference sheets for all my OCs or whenever I end up doing more full body work of him. But after that, we did my OC Sato, which I had a little bit of a hard time working on her hair color to find appropriate colors for the shadows and stuff. And then now we are working on Akemi. So Akemi's version for this one is probably my favorite. And I haven't put in the color of his shirt, or I guess I'm working on it right now. But when I didn't add it, I actually liked him with just the very dark navy blue top. I think it just looked really cute. But I think that's it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed all the little bits and bobs of whatever I drew for the pixel art for today's video. I'll show you guys the little end results, but I think that's where I'm going to leave you guys, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!